Welcome to the attack of the Corona Doom models. I'm going to discuss models in general. This is William M. Briggs, by the way, the statistician to the stars. I'm going to discuss models as they were misapplied and applied to the Corona Doom panic of last year and this year. I'm going to talk a little bit about what models are and what they are not, and what they can do and what they cannot do. I'm not going to talk all about the Corona Doom. That could be a talk lasting hours. So let's first talk about what models are and how they were used to destroy all semblance of rationality in this past year during the panic. Well, these are models. These are models not dissimilar from scientific models. In fact, they share an analogy with them. They're completely artificial. They're tweaked and primped and made to look completely unnatural. They only say what they are told to say, and they have no bearing on reality for the most part. They're only abstractions from it. So let's look and see, and also, of course, because they are so pretty to look at, the that create models love them, which is entirely natural. So now let's look in these stunning graphics exactly what's going on in all models of any kind. This includes, of course, the Corona Doom models. It includes all scientific models. It includes all artificial intelligence. It includes any kind of model. So what goes into a model? Well, assumptions, a whole list of assumptions. Usually some of them are stated quite explicitly, but some are not. There are many tacit assumptions or assumptions that are derivable from the list of stated assumptions that go into models. It's the assumptions that are unstated or tacit that cause confusion often. And we won't get too much into that. You could really dig deep into this, and I do, and I'll show you a book at the end that sort of that you could look at if you're really interested in this. Well, past observations called data might go into this model, measures, and math. Now, what this means is because it's math, we can only apply models to those things in reality which are measurable, and most things in reality are not measurable. In fact, a great deal of the parts of reality that are most meaningful to us are not measurable. And models, can be used for them, can be used for these things only when we try to quantify the unquantifiable, as is often done. But it doesn't work. It involves all sorts of shortcuts and assumptions that go wrong, and leads to gross and vast over-certainties. Anyway, but most scientific models involve the measurable and speak of the measurable, so we're in little problem as far as that goes. Later I'll tell you about what we don't do with model output, how models themselves don't imply morality, or what to do about the assumptions that a model makes. Now, all models are designed to say X, to say something, to say an X. And what this does, this is a computerized model. You can see right here, it's very nicely computerized. It's plugged into the wall. That makes all of its pronouncements error-free in the minds of many. But this model says, say X. The prediction is X. Now, what I mean by this is that all models, I'm going to repeat this over and over, all models only say what they are told to say. I'm going to say it again. All models only say what they are told to say. This isn't just garbage in, garbage out. This is deeper than this. This is all models are nothing but this list of assumptions, data, and math. That's it. You can make no discoveries from models. Discoveries go into models. You can't list a bunch of assumptions and create a model and then announce that the model has discovered, for instance, that lockdowns work or lockdowns are going to save lives. We'll see later that is only a restatement of the assumption that lockdowns work. And how do we know if lockdowns work or not? Well, you can't tell by a model. Again, I want to say all models say only what they are told to say. This is not necessarily nefarious. We have many good models of reality, of abstractions of reality, And it's well that we use these models, but they are only saying what they are told to say. And the reason these models work is when they do work, is they are told to say the right thing. The models that fail to say the right thing because they were told to say the wrong thing. So again, I say to you, all models only say what they are told to say. Well, here is an example of a very useful model, one that is used to make casinos billions of dollars the world over. We have a list of assumptions, abstractions, and some math that we can deduce from it, such as we have a device or an object that has 6 sides, only one side of which can show when thrown. And this goes into a model which says X, and from this the model itself deduces the probability of this X. For instance, a 6 showing is 1/6. Now this is just a model. This is not a real die or a pair of dice. This is an abstraction from reality. This is not a real die. Yes, dice have 6 sides, sort of. One side will land upwards most of the time. It says nothing about cheating. It says nothing about weighted dice. It says nothing about how the dice are thrown. It says nothing about the gravitational field in which the dice are thrown, or the friction on the surface on which the dice fall, or if they have to hit a back surface or anything, or about fancy ways of tossing them or anything like that. This model is a complete abstraction from reality. So how do we know it applies to reality? Well, we simply say it does. We simply say this model applies to reality, real dice in particular, and then what do? Well, we test that model against reality. Now, as I said, scientists, they create their models, and they rightly fall in love with them. They take sometimes a lifetime's worth of work. These are created by very intelligent people. The models themselves are complex. They're fascinating. They're deep in many ways, and they're interesting. And so it's right that not statisticians, but all researchers and everything should be in love with their models. There's nothing wrong with that per se. But if you say that model is a model of reality, then you have to meet the test. You have to confront your model with reality, and in a special way that's rarely done in any of the statistical sciences. Anywhere that statistics is used, it's very rarely done. It's used often in engineering models. For instance, if you have a model of a bridge that you think will not fall down when traffic goes over it, why then we can test that model with reality by building it and seeing what happens. And as of course we all know, bridges sometimes fail, so the models fail. All right. Well, there's formal ways that we look at observations, those measurable parts of reality that the models speak of, and we see how well they match up with predictions. There's formal ways to do that. It's not very simple necessarily, but in general we say if the observations aren't like the predictions, or the predictions aren't like the observations, something has gone wrong. Well, this could be that one of the assumptions is wrong, one on the long list, or all of them. The data that was used is wrong or misleading, or the math itself is wrong. This is rare, but it happens. Or any of these are wrong. Or it just happens to be, one of those assumptions is that your model applies to a certain portion of reality, measurable reality, and it doesn't. It just does not. And so the model fails for that reason. And so, again, I say we have to test that model with data or observations that were never used in any way, in any shape or form, to build or create or to discover the model, or to discover or write down the model form, or fit the model, or however you want to say it. The only true test is to confront that model with observations, measurements that the model has never seen, that the modeler himself, I should say, is completely ignorant of, that he's never heard of, that he that we don't see. This is the true test. This is why so many statistics models fail. This is why you shouldn't believe any statistics model until it has passed such a test, and almost none of them do, because they don't confront their models with reality. They just present the model fit, and they say how good it is, and then they want you to believe how good the model is because of that. This applies to all kind of models. You've heard it in global cooling, in sustainability models, in psychology, sociology, on and on and on and on like this. All they're showing you is model fits. Well, it's an old adage in science, which everybody knows, including the people pushing models, their own models, that you could always find a model to fit the observations that you have made perfectly. It can always be done. So why is it that we then accept model fit as any kind of realistic measure to predict model goodness is something that is bizarre, and we should not. All right, then the Corona doom hit. The Corona doom hit. So what does this all have to do with models? Well, we're going to show how the models themselves led to part of the panic. The Corona doom initially hit, and we saw the propaganda coming out of China. China has 1.3, 1.4 billion people. How many people do you think die a day on the streets in China of that size and an aging population? I imagine it's more than one. It's not strange in this day and age that someone would catch one with a cell phone. But nevertheless, we took this propaganda coming out as if this was the end. Everybody did, left and right, thought this was definitely going to be it. Why? That's a great question. This was the first disease in history that was recorded, not just day by day, not just hour by hour, but minute by minute on social media accounts all around the world. Well, this is the first time in history that such a thing could be done. We didn't have the capability even 10 years ago of producing this level of global panic. But now with the technology that we have, we were able to. Such that this disease became everything. This disease became the only thing. That people die of other diseases was forgotten and poo-pooed and disparaged. That this disease was just like all the other diseases we've had, these pandemics, which we get every 10 to 20 years. We had the Asian flu in 1957, which killed up to 4 million. We had the Hong Kong flu a decade later, which killed up to 4 million, many more than the Corona doom killed, and at a time when the population was about a third of what it is now, with no panics. No panics. This one we decided to panic over. And because America led the way in the panic by far, because of the political situation. Originally, Trump said we should worry about this, and the people that hated Trump said, no, don't worry about this. Take a cruise, the fabulous Fauci said. Go to have a restaurant in Chinatown, Chuck Schumer said. And then the President Trump, he said, well, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be so concerned. Maybe we should start considering people's livelihoods. Then, of course, the people opposite him did the exact opposite of his opinion. This is the worst disease ever. We are not allowed to have death anymore. We can't have any COVID deaths of any kind ever again. It was complete madness, driven by all sorts of the politics, which, of course, we could spend a long time on, but I won't. However, when the panic began, back early in February and into March of 2020, certain models were used, namely this model from Andrew Ferguson and his Imperial College group. He was called at the time a big name, a heavyweight name, a name to rely on, a name that the governments trust. And he produced a model we're going to examine in a second that scared the hell out of everybody. But it was an absurd model. And the strange thing about it was this, what I'm going to show you here, is that he had a series of failures, of complete boondoggle, bizarre, ridiculous failures, yet he was still called upon. And why? Why? Let's look at these and then we'll answer that question. In 2001, he had a model that called for a mass culling of the beasts of the fields of the UK, which cost the country about £1 billion, and it was massively criticized afterwards, but nothing happened. Ferguson went on to greater failures. For instance, in 2002, he said he predicted with his models, there was going to be 150,000 dead from mad cow disease. 177 people actually died from it. This is a whopping error. It's just the Chicken Little stuff here, but he went on to greater successes. In 2005, he made his first Spanish flu analogy, which he was to make again in the Corona doom panic. He said that up to 200 million people were going to be dead of bird flu. You have to laugh at this stuff. The the World Health Organization was a little more sober. I believe their top number was 75 million dead. Fewer than 300 people died over a multi-year period from this bird flu. But the models said, and remember, the models only say what they're told to say. So why wasn't this guy fired? Why is he canned? Why is he still seen to be a big name? Well, let's continue going here. The 2009 was the swine flu. That was a time the panic almost took off. Social media was just beginning then. I mean, it was around, but it wasn't as global as it was now, and it wasn't nearly as large as it was now. Cell phones weren't in the hands of everybody as they are now all the time. And Ferguson, again, said that 65,000 were going to die in the UK. 457 did. So, again, a complete forecast bust. I have to stop myself from using naughty language about this kind of stuff because these are absurd predictions. Yet he goes on and on and on. So why is it? Well, here again, this model will show you why. This is his Corona Doom model, which panicked the already panicked world. He came out and said, if we don't do anything, the U.S. was going to have 2.2 million dead from the Corona Doom, and in Great Britain about 500,000. And he said, even if we invoke these strictures, these absolute mad measures of locking people in their homes and, the social distancing galore and masks and a complete restriction of liberty, still 1.1 million were going to die in the United States and about half that total in Great Britain. Well, it's completely busted. The model is completely busted. You can look carefully at this forecast. He said most of the deaths were going to start around mid-April and end sometime around August. That's a complete bust. We had a big surge in April of COVID deaths, and then it was flatlined in the summer, as you'll see is very typical. I'll show you in just a few minutes. So this model is completely wrong. And then he had another peak. We had another peak, which was also not unusual in the fall and into the winter, which is now subsiding. Also not unusual. This forecast is a complete, absolute nonsense. It's rot from start to finish. There's been so many people who've investigated it after the fact, looked at it, and found the code is just crap, full of nonsense inside the code itself. But why was it believed? There's two reasons. First of all, people were in the mood to panic. Everybody got themselves in that mood to panic because of all the social media stuff and the politics. And then we see this curve here. It peaks out around June 1st, for the United States anyway, about 17 per 100,000 population. That sounds bad. Okay, well, all right. He said 2.2 million total. All right, but nobody thought about what this curve really means. 17 per 100,000 in a country with around 350,000 people is 55,000 people dying a day. A little under 55,000 people dying a day from the Corona Doom. A day. A single day. Madness. It's madness. We didn't have that in the Spanish flu, which was 1917, which I think the CDC estimated, I might be off here, like 600,000 people died. This is a century after, with all the advances in medicine and everything else. This was going to be much worse than the Spanish flu. Just absolute idiocy that this model was taken seriously. But it was because of the one reason, besides the panic, that I haven't told you yet. It's because rulers wanted to hear this. Elites and the experts and our rulers wanted to hear this. They needed to hear this. They needed to hear that their services were needed. They needed to hear that they needed to control the population. They wanted all that to happen. And they used these models as an excuse to do it. And they have not yet been able to, at least in England anyway, in the UK, they have not been able to talk themselves out of this model's preposterous errors. They still go from lockdown to lockdown, and everything that implies neighbor ratting out neighbor for going outside more than once a day, and all the terrible things that happen because of the lockdown. Doesn't matter. They still believe these kinds of models, even though they were so ridiculously wrong, even obviously wrong at the beginning. So how did the model work? Well, it worked like this. The social distancing model was the same way, and mask models were the same way. They said, you know what? Let's assume lockdowns work. Then we'll run this on our computerized model. Here's the court, computerized. And it will pronounce lockdowns work. And scientists and the rulers and elites, they looked at this in awe and said, wow, lockdowns work. It's been proved on a model, a computer model. Well, what more reasoning did you need? That lockdowns work. The model said so. These were sophisticated models. And off we went to the races. And then we had this lovely thing here of governments. This is where we start getting into the ethics of models. A model output does not imply any ethical action or any moral action whatsoever. But governments thought it did. It said to people, you are inessential. Only essential people may go to work. Everybody else, you're inessential. You stay at home. Isn't that a nice thought to think that your government thinks that you're worthless? You're only there to take up space and possibly pass on a disease. We really lost our mind in this, and because of people like this, these absolute morons. Every one of these people is an elite. They're all counselors and well-off people in the ruling class. They decided to have Zoom meetings. That they and many others. Zoom was one of the reasons why this panic was allowed to continue as it did. I'll talk about that in a second. They all decided, you know what? Let's wear our mask during the Zoom meetings so that we may show solidarity with the cult of the mask. This is utter idiocy. This is just complete nuts. There's nothing a mask is going to do for you on a video, but they wanted to do it anyway because they wanted everybody in the cult of the mask. They just lost their minds on this. There was absolute no thinking in this. But the reason it worked is all of our elites and everything and our rulers did not suffer. They enjoyed this lockdown. They enjoyed this stuff. They came out better and ahead. We all saw the things of the oligarchs came out and made, I don't know how many billions it was, tens or hundreds of billions, and how many jobs were lost from the regular working class guys. So they made out like bandits because of this. And it was fun for them. It was fun. They could stay at home. Most of their jobs are absolutely worthless anyway. There's people are just bureaucrats and paper pushers and, time servers and the like. So it doesn't matter to them what's happening in the world. They tell you what to do and you have to obey. Simple as that. Here we go. This is what I want to say. Now, an expert, a doctor expert with a degree, a PhD, of course, in expertology, can have a theory that says X, a theory and model, same thing. But that does not mean that whatever the expert says we have to do about it is the right thing to do. Lockdowns have costs. Were the costs balanced against the supposed rewards? No, never. They just assumed it was going to work. They assumed this was going to be the best thing to do because the models said so, because the models made these dire predictions of absolute unprecedented deaths, more deaths that were caused by World War II. It's just nuts. It's just nuts. But this belief that morality flows from models is scientism or idolatry. Doctors in particular are very bad at this. They believe that you should often do what they say you should do about a diagnosis, when of course the choice of diagnosis is entirely yours. Doctors use bullying techniques and so forth. Well, in some ways they're forced into it themselves because of insurance and legal restrictions and hospital protocols and all this kind of thing. So this whole system is intertwined and just nuts, and we need to push back on it. Well, we saw all kind of stats that were thrown around. Everybody became an instant expert overnight. The only one I'm going to talk about is cases. Before 2020, in medicine, a case was a person who was actively ill and who sought and required treatment, such as needing to be hospitalized. Here, in this Corona doom panic, a case was a positive test on any of a number of different kinds of tests, even tests with very high false positive rates. And positives on tests are very easy to get if you increase testing. This is a shot of the tests, number of daily tests in the United States for the Corona doom. This is from the COVID tracking project, using all kinds of tests, the PCR tests, which everybody has heard about. They were overly sensitive, the rapid tests, and so forth. The original peak, remember, of deaths was in April, and then the next peak was in the winter. Summer was flat. There was no, very few attributed deaths, Corona doom deaths in the summer, but testing went up and up and up because everybody said, you got to get tested, you got to get tested, you got to get tested. Well, testing turns up marginal cases, asymptomatic cases, people who suffer not at all, or who are false positives, or who had a different kind of coronavirus, or who had the disease but who have now recovered. So this push on testing led to the media reporting cases, and they're not cases at all. And so everybody's tracking cases hourly, minute by minute reports of cases. The real, of course, question is how many dead? Well, we can't necessarily trust the Corona doom death statistics either, because it became a question of dying with the disease or dying of the disease. And that became a serious question that's still not exactly resolved. But what I want to show you in this is the weekly all-cause deaths. The all-cause deaths. You can see every winter, peaks up. Every summer, the all-cause deaths drop. Now, why is this? Well, because in the late fall, when it gets cold in the northern hemisphere, we all go inside in our voluntary semi-lockdowns. We spread disease and bugs among ourselves, and those who are most ill succumb. And then finally in the spring, everybody starts coming back outside again. We go out in the warm, hot summer air, the germicidal air, the virus-killing sunshine, and disease burden is low. But still, of course, people die. And what this chart also shows you is that there are, in fact, other diseases, other methods of death besides the coronavirus. The COVID is only a small portion of deaths. And whether or not it's exaggerated, it's difficult to tell because of the statistics on how they recorded it and so forth. But what we can say is we could look at this weekly deaths per week. This is the peak of 2020. It was high, but it's pretty much equivalent. Let's go back here, right about, what is that, 1991, 1992, something like this. That was also the average death rate back in 1992, and it was worse. It got worse before, much worse. Obviously, right before the war and the Great Depression and everything, another government solution causing more deaths than they wanted. So this is strange. As things were getting better, any departure from that was seen as terrible. As things get better, things get worse. Our tolerance for any kind of departure from perfection becomes less and less. That is a sociological question, not a model question. All right, I'm recording this the day or two before the CDC director came out in tears and saying, "Oh, it's the end of the world again." We're running about a surge in cases. Well, here's the actual CDC. All these numbers are CDC numbers, by the way. Everything I showed you. The actual weekly totals of attributed COVID deaths bottoming out. We haven't reached the bottoming out period. That comes around June, July, August, depending on the year. So we're still going to go down. There'll still be up and down, little ups and downs, but it'll go down. And so what's next for our models? Well, we have global cooling lockdowns. These are already being floated or brooded about or suggested by our experts and our rulers. After all, global cooling, they say, is a existential crisis, and we're all going to die. Especially women and minorities, they'll be hardest hit when the world ends. That joke, it's a terrible joke, but it's made often enough in real papers. I just saw a psychiatrist arguing as much yesterday. Anyway, here we go. Oh, sorry. They now call it global warming. Or no, the global cooling was the 70s. Global warming was the 90s. Now we call it climate change. The reason the name has to keep changing is because the climate's not being cooperative with all the models. Anyway, this is coming. You'll be ready for it when they start asking for these kinds of things. Now, co-authors Doug Axe and Jay Richards wrote a book on the Corona Doom Panic, which you could see there on the left. Doug is a biologist. He handled those aspects of things, looking at the virus in depth. Was it man-made origin, all that kind of thing. And some of the statistics on that, some of the biology on that. Jay looked at the sociological aspects, the economics. And a lot of people said, who cares about the economics, the economy and so forth? We need to lock down to save lives. Well, as Jay is fond of pointing out, I love this line of his, the economy is how we get our food. The economy is how you support your family. The economy is how you pay your bills. So all of these elites and everything who had no trouble and were in no difficulty and were in no danger, they could speak glibly about this, but everybody else tossed out of work. Forget them. I also have this book, Uncertainty. It's not a light reading book. It's a philosophy of modeling and probability. But if you're interested in these things and other errors that people make, you can get that too. Thank you very much.